You good? We're streaming, we're live?
Should be streaming, yeah.
Okay. So,
I'm gonna text.
welcome guys to Project Codex. This is our, I don't even know what, like 7th or 8th meetup or something like that. This meetup's for junior developers, kind of help you get some experience, get hired, break into the industry, network, all that good stuff. Today Tim is going to be giving a presentation on Flutter. So we're going to try and record this and have it up on YouTube with some editing so we can have like a better recording maybe than the stream. But thanks everybody for coming out. And while we're recording, if you guys can keep the chatter down a little bit so we can get some good audio, and then like raise your hand if you have any questions so Tim can answer them. And I'll let him get to it.
I am sharing. Yeah, yeah. You mean to the... Yeah. Hmm? Okay. All right, guys. Welcome to an introduction on Flutter. We're going to kind of go through and talk about some high-level concepts about Flutter, if you've ever been interested about it. So we're not going to go too deep. I've got about 6 or 7 apps that I can kind of demonstrate some of the different things you can do in Flutter. Who here has heard anything about Flutter or watched anything on YouTube, read anything? I mean, no, you guys, come on. Any of you guys? Do you guys know what it is?
It's a canvas element, basically hybrid native app.
Yeah, kind of. It runs its own graphics engine. So all the widgets may look like they're native, but they're really not native because they're running in its own the Flutter graphics engine. So just a little bit about myself. My name's Tim. I'm a backend developer here at Capco. I started off working in Rails and API development, and then did some RPG development for a financial tech company, working on a core banking system, some old technology. And here at Capco, I mostly work with Java, Java Spring, and these are some of the technologies and that I'm working with over here at Capco. Flutter is kind of something I'm working on the side, just to kind of dive in and kind of experiment with something other than Java. At Capco, we're a consulting firm, so you never know what the clients might end up wanting, and you know, I may not know if there will be a Flutter project down the road, or maybe native Android, native iOS. So you know, they kind of really push us here to kind of spread our wings and try to dive in and kind of get an understanding of different technologies. So some of it's personal, some of it's just I want to expand my horizons as a developer and learn new things. So that's kind of where I'm at. I started messing with Flutter last year. Was it last year when it was like version 0.3 or something? So I've been kind of on and off with it over the last few months. I've kind of come back to it since in December they released Flutter 1.0. Their last month they released 1.2. They skipped 1.1. But what's unique about it, it's Google's attempt to have a cross-platform SDK that runs on iOS and Android. They are attempting to get it to work on desktop applications as a desktop application, so for iOS or for Mac OS and Windows. And they also have a project called Hummingbird, which hopefully they're trying to get Flutter to run as web apps. So ideally they want this to be completely cross-platform, so as a Flutter developer you'll be able to develop on mobile, desktop, and web. What's different about it is it uses Dart. It's a programming language developed by Google. It was first started I think in 2011. It was meant to replace JavaScript, so it was meant to the only issue was that it needed the web browsers needed to support the Dart virtual machine, kind of like the JavaScript virtual machine, but they couldn't even get the Chrome team to adopt it because then it would get even more heavy, like adding another virtual machine to run this language. So it kind of like they took it off, and I guess they started experimenting with it and came up with the Flutter framework. Some things about Flutter. So Dart compiles down to the bytecode, to the ARM code, so it's able to run at native-like speeds, like with Objective-C, Swift, Java, Kotlin, and some of what I mentioned earlier. So the native UI components really aren't native, but they are drawn to be native. So it runs its own graphics engine, and there's no communication layer between the view and your code as you're coding. There's no separate layouts. Like in Android, you have XML layouts, and web, you'd have HTML layouts. This, you write straight code, and it compiles down and builds out full UI screens along with the business logic with it. So, let's see. Some of the things I mentioned before, why Dart compiles down. It also transpiles down to JavaScript. So there is a project that I'll show that it's part, almost all the business logic is written in Dart, but there's a web component and there's the Flutter component. So between the two projects, 40% of the code is shared with Dart. It kind of feels similar to C++, C#, Java. So if you've ever learned those languages, if you're in school or if you're dabbling in native Android, it's pretty easy to kind of pick it up and go. It supports asynchronous programming because it was supposed to replace JavaScript. So even with JavaScript, you'll kind of feel a little comfortable with it. So the first app I'm going to show is like the Flutter demo. It's not a demo app. It's like when you first create your first Flutter app. So Flutter create, whatever, like your React create, stuff like that. It's just going to show material design widgets. So in the Flutter libraries, you've got the Cupertino library and the material library. Material library referring to the material components widgets. So you have app bars, scaffolds, text widgets, buttons. Those are all reminiscent of the material design, specifications that the Google team develops. So it'll look like an Android app. The Cupertino library is for widgets that mimic the iOS landscape. So what buttons look like on iOS, and the navigation tab bars, even the animations as far as navigating between different screens, that all mimics what it would look like and feel like in a native iOS app. So I'm going to go ahead and I already have it running here. So right now, that is really not, okay, it's gone. Okay, so right now this app is running both in Android and iOS. So if you click here, it updates if it's running, yeah, it updates the counter on both sides. So it says you have pushed the button how many times. And hopefully that's not, can you guys read that? You guys are a lot closer, so I don't have to, than I expected. So, that's not where I want to go. All right. One thing I want to talk about that's pretty cool about Flutter, is hot reload. So, for those of you that develop in the web with React, Angular, if you can pull in some packages, npm packages, and you you go ahead and save your project, and it automatically recompiles and then loads your page for you, and you can see the changes you made, whether you're changing colors on some kind of button or menu. You can automatically see your changes. In the native world, I know Android's got a kind of a version of this. It doesn't always work, kind of breaks. Flutter is able to mimic like web development in that sense. So if you're focusing on your UI as you're developing an application, you can quickly make quick changes to the shades of your color or different buttons or location, like a location of a widget on a screen. You can quickly Command S, save your code, and it'll automatically recompile for you, and within under a second, rebuild your whole widget tree, and you can see the changes you've already made. So it inserts the code directly into the Dart virtual machine, and that's how it's able to do that. So really quick, so I can pull up the IDE and go ahead and change the color here to blue, and then save it. It'll hot reload, and I did not go over. And I saved it to the iOS. I don't know why it's not showing on here. Command S for Android, yeah. And then you should see it on there as well. So another, what was that? Underneath a second, it was, or a little bit over a second, it was able to recompile. You can even change text real quick. So I love Flutter. Command S, hot reload. So 1.2 seconds, and we got I love Flutter. So it's really cool when you're dealing with, if you're a designer, if you're working in a project and you've got a UI designer that gives you designs, it's pretty easy to to grab that, build out your layout, and we'll talk about layout widgets. And it's pretty easy just to take those, build something out, scaffold it out real quick, and as you're making changes and experimenting, it's real quick to recompile your app and check to see if you're as close as possible to the designs. Move on to the next one. What I was talking about before, so the widget tree in that app, this is actually what the widget tree looks like in that app we just looked at. So we have an app called My App, and it returns Material App. Material App is just kind of a helper function of referring, and so it will accept material components, the material components from the material library. And it brings in the My Homepage, which is the stateful widget, and we'll talk about stateful widgets in a little bit, which will then, you'll have a page scaffold out, and within that scaffold, it'll take an app bar. We instantiated an app bar and included a text where you saw I love Flutter or Flutter on the app bar. We took in a center widget within the body of the scaffold, and then within that center widget, we created a column. So for web developers, building out layouts feels pretty intuitive when you're coming from HTML and CSS over. It's definitely a grid-like system. You've got columns, rows, grid views, list views. Some of those are from like more of Android, in an Android world, but the rows and columns makes it really easy for a web developer to come in and like understand like how they're building out their widgets and building out their layout of their apps. And within the column widget, we had two text widgets, so children of the column. And then at the very bottom right, we had that floating action button. Again, scaffold, and I can show you real quick, the scaffold, let me pull this down real quick. The scaffold knows, am I on here? Yeah. So in here, we have the scaffold. It knows it can take an app bar. We gave it a material app bar. We gave it the title. We gave it a text widget. The body was that center, and within that body, we had a child, which was the column widget. And we decided to center that alignment. And within that, a column can take a list of widgets, an array of widgets. And then we built out the two text widgets, one saying you have pushed the button this many times. And then we had a text widget which took an input of the number of how many times that button's been pressed. And we'll talk about that. That's known as far as stateful and stateless widgets and the difference between those two. And then we took the theme that we had previously established up here in the My App widget, and brought that down so we don't have to manually code it how many times. If you're trying to stick with a theme throughout your whole app, you can reference it to its parent widget. And then the scaffold knows that it needs to take in a floating action button, or can take a floating action button. So we go ahead and created that, and then added the onPress method to increase the number of times that the button's been pressed. So a cool little tool here on the side is on Android Studio. I'm not sure if you guys can really read that, but you can actually see your widget tree right there. So if you kind of get lost, you can kind of see where you're at. When I first started with Flutter, you didn't even have these comments. These automatically get added in. That's not me adding that in. That's a plugin within Android Studio. You can also build Flutter apps in VS Code as well. So as you build out an app, so if I wanted to add another text widget, I'm still within this column widget. So I know that I'm within this array. So I can just tab out and I can add another text widget. Hello there, and then I'm not sure which one I'm saving it to. Let's save it, and then yeah, I saved it to the Android app. And there's hello there right there. So there's some cool things that they've added along the way. There are ways you can check performance as you're running the app. The render tree, that's some more deep stuff. That's a whole, more stuff behind the scenes that's going on. But that's it for the first app, I believe, to kind of go through. Weatherly is a simple weather app that I built that I kind of demoed to the team here at Capco when I first, gave one of my first presentations. So it's a simple one page, like there's no other pages you're going to. It's a simple app with text of what city you're in or what city you've entered to ask for some weather location. It's just using weather data, so it's using the Open Weather API app. I'm going to go ahead and open it up right here. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And while it's running, it should be already installed in the app, so it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't take that long. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Is the code the same for both apps?
For these, yeah, for this code, yeah. Ideally, ideally you'd want 100%, right? That's the goal of this project, is to build an app that runs 100% on both Android and iOS with the same code. Sometimes I have run into this, but you do run into the issue where you might have to write native code for certain things. If you're accessing camera APIs, you'd have to write something native. And actually, I can show you real quick. It's kind of small. I'm not sure if you can see it. So within the project structure of a Flutter application, you have an Android directory and you have the iOS directory. And in there, you can write native code. A lot of packages that you pull in, packages are like plugins, I don't know what else, libraries, that people develop Flutter packages that they write the code natively. So there's code out there that I'm messing with where it imports and lets you use SQLite for your internal database. There's code written natively for iOS and code written natively for Android, for either Java or Kotlin. And then you just pull that package in, or you import it into your project, and then you're writing Dart code. You're just using the helper methods that they supply you in Dart. But in the background, in both platforms, it's running its native code to give you, the file directory, where you're storing your database, or when you're creating the SQL code, inserting the tables, creating columns, rows, etc. So ideally, yes, the idea is to share 100%. I will talk about some challenges. If you want to make an app, if you want to have material app widgets show up on the page, or if you want Cupertino apps to show on the page, depending on what platform you're on. So here's the Weatherly app. So right now it defaults to Spokane, so currently that's the weather. So I can go ahead and enter Orlando, and then I can enter Miami in the other app. And that's the same code, and it's a lot hotter in Miami. It's the same code running in both apps. So even if you spell the name wrong, I even have it detect the city doesn't exist. So I can quickly show you the code here. And you can even see some of the debugging information here. I do have a problem. I couldn't figure out what it was. So when the app first runs, it makes that API call. And then it actually makes the call twice. I don't know why. I could never figure that out. But it must be that I'm making the call, and then I rebuild the widget and make the call again. I couldn't figure it out. But then, as you can see, when I sent the request for, I think this might have been Miami or something, I got temperature there. And then when I made the call to the M city, I got a 404 back, city not found. So, but real quick, so we've got, it's a one-page, it's a stateful widget. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but stateful widgets basically, if you know the data on the page, or if your widget, the structure of the layout or the text widgets, or if anything is going to change based upon new data it's receiving, whether it's from a database, whether it's from an API, you're going to need to go with a stateful widget. Nothing's going to change on it, then you can use a stateless widget. So in the previous app, on the push button app that we had, my app is a stateless widget. So the structure of that tree right here was never going to change, right? The data inside of my home page, this stateful widget might change, but everything else around it, its actual structure was never going to change. It wasn't going to change based on what data you gave my home page, the stateful widget, my home page. My app was never going to change. So that's when you would want to adopt a stateless widget. And then if you know something's going to change, the tree structure is going to change in that layout, then you're going to need to extend out the stateful widget class. So back to the weather app. So I created a city controller, which is a text editing controller, so you can assign that to the text field that you're entering text in. And again, these are all material design widgets, and I'll show you an app that uses Cupertino here in a little bit. So we've got our weather, or a scaffold, our app bar again. We have a body, but this time we're using a list view. The reason why I want to use a list view is if I try to, I'll pull it up here. So if I try to type something in, right, it's fine if I'm portrait, but if I want to try to go, and I might have, usually it cuts off. Okay, well that's because I have a list view. If it didn't have this in a list view, I wouldn't be able to scroll. I would get, pixels will cut off and I get a warning saying, hey, you're X amount of pixels over. So generally, if you're wanting to type something into a text edit field, you want to have a list view. Unless you know that screen is never going to change, you're not going to need to scroll, or if someone rotates, it's not going to affect your layout, then you can go ahead and use a list view. So I'll go ahead and flip that back. But the big things here that I want to kind of show you is the API call. So a feature in Dart is an object that builds itself out based upon a calculation that's being sent out. So it's you're sending a method out saying, I'm grabbing some data. That future object won't get built until that asynchronous call gets completed and it comes back. So with that future, I'm calling that within this future builder. So this widget, what this actual widget is I have this widget that gets built. So this return in Java, you'll notice that in Java yourself, you return, if you have a string, you'll name it string and then your method or your variable. This is the same thing in Dart. So this update city widget is actually a widget. It's going to take in a string of city. And as you can see up here, update city widget here is the child, and that's what we're looking at that builds out here. So this whole text right here, Orlando, the degree, this is all one widget. Now I could have built it out in separate widgets, but I just made it easy by just, putting it all in one. So this returns a future builder. Again, it builds upon that future object concept, but it's basically a type that allows a widget to build itself based upon the latest snapshot of data you've received from an API. So we call the feature get weather that we have up here. We pass in what we gained from the from either the text from either this string here that we took from the controller, or the default that's in my utils file over here that it defaults to Spokane when the app first starts. So then it takes in a build context, and we'll talk about build context and snapshot. Snapshot I kind of mentioned a second ago was the data that within the last snapshot of data you just got back from an API call. And then we're going to go ahead and it goes in and it looks for, first I have it checked to see if it got a 404. That was the easiest way for me to build it out. So if someone typed in a city that doesn't exist or the API doesn't know about, it just returns back to say city doesn't exist. So if it does come back and it has data, we map it to this content, or this content variable named content, and we go ahead and then access that. So it's pretty easy to access this data. You just have to know the kind of JSON you're getting back and refer to it in these brackets. So we know that in the content, or really it's just JSON, but we know that the key name is, or the key value is name. So we know that's the city name. We're going to return that back. And then we're also going to access the main temperature. So in the JSON, it's there's a main object, and then within that you have a temperature property. We can get the value there, and then the same thing for humidity, temperature minimum, and temperature maximum. So when I first started messing with Flutter last year, it was far more difficult to mess with JSON, like in getting called, data back from an API. You had to do a lot more work. This JSON library that they've created is a lot easier now to deal with. There's a lot more code and boilerplate code. You had to build out full Dart objects and then map them all back to your object and then refer them back in the code. Now you can just create a map object, content, and then just refer to the JSON in the brackets. So the JSON properties in the brackets. So that's all done in 125 lines of code, and probably less than that if you consider that a lot of that's just indentation. So, and the method is all within the the same page. Now, you can extract that out and keep your codes, you know, your business logic separate and make it a little bit cleaner, but yeah, in 125 lines of code. So, let's go back over here. The next app I want to show is Shrine. So Shrine is an app that Google developed. It kind of uses material design widgets, but they did have some twists, so you can customize material design widgets. They don't have to come out of the box. They come out of the box looking a certain way, but you can modify the animations, the shadows, the shapes, the borders, all that stuff. You can do that with the material design widgets and the Cupertino widgets. So I'm going to go ahead and run that real quick. Run that on iPhone. Run that on Android. Download real quick. Any questions so far?
Someone in the chat room was asking, I guess you mentioned futures.
Yeah.
Is that similar to like promises? Like,
From what I remember, I haven't messed with promises in a while,
so
but
promises are like you make a request
yeah.
and it's promised to come back at some point. So
Well, yeah, basically, yeah. But it builds an object. It's an object type, but yeah, you make it depends upon the calculations. You send an async call out, and then you're waiting for that calculation to process and come back. So yeah, very similar to that. I guess it booted up on iOS first. So real quick, now there's nothing really here. You can type anything to log into this app. Now these are, I'm not sure, this is a text field just like this over here, just like you saw in the weather app. But they added a border to it. They customized the border, gave it the, I don't know what the angles on it, and then they gave it label, the label field at the top, username. They customized all that, and those are raised buttons here, so that's the same kind of button. Here is here, but they went in and changed some of the properties of that widget. You can actually, in the code, so if you're in Android Studio, I'm in Shrine right now, I don't, where's that at? If I can find it. What's that called? Login? Next. See if it loads. That's not in there. Okay, well, you can break open, is there a raise button? Raise button, yeah. Yeah, okay, there you go. So you can change the shape there. And there's so many different things you can do in Flutter. I'm still learning, obviously, all the time. It's a side thing. But you can break open the raise button class, and then you can see the properties associated with that widget. And experiment, change things, elevation, padding, shape, color, all that stuff. So those are all properties that it accepts. It knows you can change it. It'll come out of the box a certain way, but that's all that kind of stuff you can change with it. They've got really good comments within the code itself. So a lot of times I can just look at the comments and try to figure out what I'm trying to do. And then if it's not enough information for me to make a decision or figure out how to get something working, I can just go to the Flutter docs first. And if I don't find any information there, then I go to the community. There's you ever heard of Gitter? It's a GitHub chat. So there's a Flutter channel in there, and there's tons and tons of people in there all the time talking. It's more popular than the Slack channel I found. And then so I can easily throw out a question, and people are constantly asking questions, answering them back and forth. So I'll go back to the app. So both apps are running. You can go ahead and log in. You can probably just skip right past. So this is an app bar just like we saw before as well. So they gave it they changed the shape of it a little bit. And it's kind of hard to see on the screen. It might be a little bit easier over here. But there's a little bit of border shadow there right above it, so it makes it feel like it's popping out, like it's kind of a piece of paper. They even changed the animation. So normally here, default on an app bar, if you add like a drawer, an app drawer, the app drawer for a material design widget usually comes out from left to right to mimic what happens on a native Android app. But here they had it bring it from the top down. And then they also, this normally is a hamburger button here all the way. These three lines usually come across all the way. They changed that as well, and they added this little diamond button there. And then obviously all this stuff is different too. So they also added some complex layouts here. So there's columns here, and then there's an overall row. So the row takes in all these multiple columns. So you can also change it and go to clothing, so you'll see clothing. And if you click on an item, it adds to your little shopping cart on the bottom right here. Again, that has to do with state, when we talked about stateful widgets. Here, I believe they're using shared preferences. So there's a package, shared preferences. I know that's in Android that has shared preferences. I don't know what it's called in iOS, but the package refers to them both as shared preferences. So it uses, again, the package uses native code, but you don't care about the native code. All you care about is what you have to type in Flutter and Dart to access that, to access that kind of, to access the methods. So, let's see, yeah. So again, you could take material design widgets and still modify them. You don't have to use it out of the box. You can change more than just the color or the text size. You can actually modify things a lot more than you would think. Again, that's why they're not really native. They're drawn to be native-like, to look exactly like out of the box, to look like what they look like on the native platforms, but you have a lot of flexibility. So let me flip over. The next app I wanted to show you guys real quick is this Veggie Seasons app. This is also an app written by Google. By the way, some of these apps, like this last one I showed you and the one I'm about to show you now, they're in the Flutter repo on GitHub under Flutter samples. So these are all written by Google to kind of show developers different things you can do with them. Some of them they've demonstrated on DartConf or a Google conference, and so they have a lot of different examples to show developers how to build, use different, basically to showcase what they've been working on. And also this app will have a search bar at the top that not fully officially supported in the Cupertino library, but it is something that they're working towards to adding to the library. So as you can see, it looks like an iOS app. You've got your little tab navigation at the bottom. And your little cards. You can open up, add your favorite, save it to your little garden here. Again, Cupertino little switch there. There's even a whole, I did this the other night because I was messing with it. You go through that trivia thing, it's like 10 questions they'll ask you, and then they'll give you the total score of if you got the questions right or wrong. And then I guess you can retake it too. But then you can go back. So I've just saved that to my garden. If I go to my garden, now the apples are showing up. So I know for sure they're using shared preferences on here. They're not using a SQL database. So I don't know why it's taking so long for the Android app to always load up. So I wanted to see, I've had it load up on the Android already to see what it would look like running Cupertino widgets on an Android app, because it was easy. The Cupertino library is pretty far behind the material library right now. If you notice, in a lot of the material widgets, they don't call it material app bar, material this, but in the Cupertino library, they'll qualify it by saying Cupertino button or Cupertino page route. So if it doesn't have Cupertino in front of it, it's material for sure. But as you can see, there's a Cupertino scaffold, tab bar, navigation bar item, except that doesn't say Cupertino, but they are children of a Cupertino tab scaffold, so I guess there was no need to add Cupertino to it. Let's see, yeah. Trying to show. Okay, so some of them, all the layout widgets are platform agnostic. They don't care. But this is where it gets tricky. When you're having different scaffolds out, and you want to. The tricky part with Flutter right now is if you wanted the app to render all material widgets if you're on Android, and then you wanted them to, render all out Cupertino widgets if you're on iOS. There's no real smart way for it to do it right now. The app bar will do it kind of. So like if you build a material app bar, on Android it'll move itself all the way to the left, and on iOS it'll center itself in the middle. to kind of mimic what a app bar would look like on iOS. But a lot of that, a lot of the material widgets are specific to Android. So yeah, it'll run, but if you're kind of aiming towards, all right, I want a fully native looking app for iOS and Android, it gets tricky. There are plugins right now that do that work for you, but you'll have to call them, the way they named it would be like platform button. And then from that, there's an abstract class that determines, okay, are you on Android and iOS? All right, if you're on Android, I'll build out a raised button. If you're on iOS, I'll build out a Cupertino button. And you can do it manually yourself. I've tested it, I've worked with it before, but it is a pain in the butt sometimes when you're, especially if you're doing something based upon an action from a user. So like, I had trouble I had a login page where I was trying to log in, and if I was on Android and I failed to log in, I wanted a dialog box to come up, and it would work fine on Android. The Android dialog box would come up, but then if I was trying to do it on iOS, it would fail to bring up the Cupertino version of that dialog box, because within the widget tree, you're trying to track back to see what's the parent widget. Well, I was trying to track it back to a material app, and it's like, no, you can't attach a Cupertino widget to a material. The other way is, which would defeat the whole purpose, is to say, here's my code for Android, here's my code for iOS, and that defeats the whole purpose. The Flutter team knows it's a problem, so they are working to try to resolve that to make it easier. Or as you can see, you can customize what's out of the box already and kind of make it not feel like an Android or iOS. If you're looking for pure native on both sides, that's kind of difficult right now. So that's some of the, I don't know why I never loaded up on Android, so go ahead and add that real quick. And then we go back to My Garden, and then we see BlackBerry's added. Settings, all these little switches, preferred categories, and My Garden, click X there, yeah. So, back to home. Add avocado, yeah. So, again, feels like a native iOS app. Looks like one. This search bar, I don't know where to go. Yeah, so this isn't part of the package yet for the Cupertino library when I was reading their repo. But they're looking to eventually add it to the library. So they're still doing a lot of work. That's one of their focuses this year as well, is to really build out the Cupertino library, try to bring it to parity to the material library, and then maybe from there they can figure out a way to get it to be, platform aware, so you don't have to do all this extra work. So a lot of the apps I've seen that are developed for both platforms, there is a website called All the Widgets or something that has it's like a showcase site that has a bunch of apps that are on the Play Store or the App Store. A lot of them are only on the Play Store. There's no iOS version. The few that I did see that are on both, they kind of go kind of agnostic, as far as like the look and feel. It's kind of custom, so you don't feel like you're on Android or iOS. Kind of feel like it's your own thing, your own brand. So let me go back to, so that was the app we just looked at, Veggie Seasons. Inkino. So Inkino, this is the one that, let me go ahead and just open it real quick. Run it. And run it. Okay. So this is the multi-platform app. It's for a movie theater, Inkino Cinemas. Majority, I guess it uses Redux, has an extensive automated test, and 40% of the code is shared between Flutter and the web. So actually all the basic logic is written in Dart, so it allows both mobile and web to access the same APIs. Also, and I'm not sure if they'll end up changing this, but the progressive web app is built in Angular Dart, like I mentioned before. The Flutter team is working on a project called Hummingbird, which will allow you to build Flutter apps for the web. So kind of defeat the purpose of this, needing to build out an Angular Dart app separate. But not sure how far that's off. They only mention in their kickoff, in their launch party kind of thing. I don't know why, again, my emulator's not working there. They only announced it at the very end, like, hey, we've got Project Hummingbird coming to web, and that was kind of it. I haven't heard much about it. You heard more about the desktop embedding than that. All right, there you go. So, same app. It is using tab navigation, but again, they customize it. Doesn't make it feel so iOS-y. Nav bar at the top, just like the other apps you guys saw. You go ahead and click inside the movie and scroll down, see some screenshots, see some descriptions, the cast. Even the animation looks a little bit different here. No, about the same. Yeah. So there is a website that you can access, and the website looks very similar to this too. So it's more of an app that really kind of promotes their brand, more so than the native look and feel of most apps. Most apps want to like look and feel like any other Android or any other iOS app, but it definitely looks like they want their own custom feel here. So, any questions so far? I wish I had pulled it up real quick to see the website. Might be a little. So some of the things we talked about before, the different layout widgets. These are like agnostic. It doesn't matter. They work with both Cupertino or Material widgets. Column widgets we've talked about before. You guys kind of understand, columns and rows if you're coming from web. A stack widget, which there might have been some in there. I didn't go through all the code bases, but so a stack widget is, again, it takes in a list of widgets, just like columns and rows do. But instead, you can stack them on top of each other. And then you can position them in certain ways. So if you want to get certain effects, if you want to get multiple boxes and then kind of move them around, you can do that and then create different effects, box shading, box shadows and stuff like that. Container widgets, again, it's just, like kind of like a box, and then it takes in one child. You can add some padding around it. Padding can be applied to anything on here. Padding is its own separate widget, and not only that, it can be a property of the different widgets as well, except for these three. But center widget just basically is a widget that just goes straight to the page, center of the page, and then from there you can build things out. So like one of the apps we saw before, you had a center widget as the body of the scaffold, and then within that you had a column, and then from there you can just add widgets right underneath each other as you kept going. Grid view and list view, you saw some of those. You saw the grid view, I think, just now. So what you saw with the movie screens, the movie photos, those are grid views. You can give it. It's really easy. You can literally just give it a parameter of like how many columns you want, and then if it's and then the length of it, which is the list, you give it based upon the API call you get out, how much you're bringing back. That'll be the length of the list that you're rendering out. And then list view, again, you can either know if you can hard code it, or again, if you're making an API call and you're going to get a certain amount of, you're going to get, you don't know if you're going to get 30, you're going to get 50 responses back. You can build it on based upon the list, the length of the list that you're getting back from the API call. Again, we kind of briefly talked about this earlier, stateless, stateful. So if you know if the widget tree is not going to change within that stateless widget that widget you're building out that's an extend stateless widget, you stick with the stateless widget. But if you know that somehow that state of the widget is going to change, you would extend out the stateful widget. So again, if you're interacting with a database or an API or user input, if you type in like, hey, my name is blah, and you have a text widget that says, hey, my name, well, welcome, and then whatever the user put in as their name, that's what it says after welcome. That again, you'd use a stateful widget for. So from user inputs, from database queries, from API calls, you would want to use stateful widget. So what state? It's again the behavioral. It's referring to the behavioral state of the widget. It knows where it's gonna, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah, again, so the point of the stateful widget is to know that every time the state of the widget changes, it forces the SDK forces it to rebuild itself. So why am I losing my train of thought here? So any changes applied to the state forces the widget to rebuild itself. So it rebuilds the whole widget. I think it just rebuilds the widget within the tree. So if you're only changing one widget, it's not going to rebuild the whole tree. It'll just rebuild that specific widget inside the tree. And then context refers to where that widget is within the tree. So it can only refer to one state. So it can't be passed from that context can't be passed to some other widget. But an idea is a container widget that has a child or children. That container widget would be the parent widget, or be the parent context of the children widget. These are just some basic concepts that I know I kind of glossed over them as we were going through the different apps, but these are some of the concepts that are used through the widget tree and building out the web layouts. Again, so state is associated with the context. So that association is permanent. You can't move it once it's associated. That's it. Can't change it. You can't access the state object through another context as well. So you can use you can use keys within Flutter. A lot of times Flutter will just take care of that problem yourself. So a lot of times you can use keys if you have the user in a certain position in a list and you leave that page, but you make a callback to come back. Let's say the user wants to go hit that button, come back to that page. You could use a key to save where the user was looking at on the page. So the widget tree itself is its own thing, but a key could save the location of where the user was scrolling at on the page. So, and there's some Flutter resources here. So there's some sample repos. Yeah, that's what I was talking about for you, GitHub Flutter/samples. So some of the apps that we're showing you, there's some more in there as well. The Dart site, Flutter YouTube channel, they finally just created their own YouTube channel. Before they were under the Google developers channel for a long time, so it was really annoying to have to kind of sift through all their videos there. There's some really good blogs here. So the differences between Flutter native, cross-platform, and the reactive approaches, so React Native. Some deeper dives into the widget state context, inherited widgets, and again, talking layer cake, which refers to the SDK itself, the graphics engine, how that all renders out, how it works. I can send the link to the Slack channel. So these aren't the actual links, but this is just the root URL for them. So that's pretty much it. I can show the one app real quick that does have platform aware widgets. So it will change based upon what platform it's on. Let's see. Open that real quick. That load up. I don't know why it's loading. Okay. So we'll go ahead and run that in Android. While that's loading real quick, I can talk about the code. So you have a main.dart file there. And again, what I was talking about before, this platform scaffold, instead of being scaffold, it's a platform scaffold, and it's just an abstraction from the scaffold class. So platform widget is the extracted class, and in here it determines, it looks for what platform it's on, and from that it creates an iOS or Android widget. Takes in the build context. And it's still not loaded yet. Is this the right one? Oh, I didn't even open the right one. This is not the right app. Too many different apps here. should be platform aware widgets, that's the one. This window. Dang it, should open that up. Platform aware widgets. And, all right, let's run this again. Android, iOS. Actually, yeah, so it didn't load all the way. Ideally, this would have been a list, and instead of using these Cupertino switches, Android would have used material switches. But this other app has got more to it than the one I was about to show you. I think I'm bogging down because of the amount of stuff that's running. Yeah. I should close some of this stuff down. Right. Yeah, while that's loading, anybody have any questions? Yeah.
How popular is Flutter among developers?
It's gaining steam. I mean, I know, you hear things and watch things on YouTube that you've got some shops are adopting it. You read it on Slack or you read it on Reddit. I mean, we can take a look real quick at the repo right now. I think it's pretty popular because it not only is it being developed by Flutter, it's also being co-developed by the community. So it's open source. A while back, I accidentally subscribed to the repo, and it wasn't just for like committed changes to the master, but also issues. And I was getting flooded by emails nonstop from the community, just issuing or creating issues in the Flutter repo, and then throwing changes. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty popular. But there are actually, if I do Flutter Showcase, I can show you some apps that some companies are using or building in Flutter now. So I know the Google Ads app is written in Flutter now. So Google built this app entirely in Flutter. One of their own apps. They didn't build it in native Android or native iOS. It's in Flutter right now. So they had enough confidence in the framework that that they built that app entirely in Flutter. And that was one of the first apps they kind of came out with, like, hey, this is our SDK. We trust this enough that we built it in Flutter. I know Alibaba's got components that are written in Flutter. Their whole app isn't in Flutter, but they are like doing some conversions. There's some YouTube videos of some of the developers talking about it. Reflectly, the Hamilton Musical app tree, and then there was I'm not sure where that link is, but there is a link of all the widgets. It's all widgets, that's it. So these are a bunch of apps that are written by independent developers, little development studios that are all written in Flutter. Some of these, they'll have links straight to, you can find links to them in GitHub and download them yourself and run them on. That's actually where I found the Inkino app here. Was on this right here. There it is right there. Google Play Store and App Store. This is a newer one right here that I didn't see before. Google Play and App Store. So it's gaining. Actually, what I meant to do was Flutter GitHub and see how many stars. So they're at 58,000 stars now. So it's gaining. I mean, it just hit 1.0 last, like in December, so it hasn't even been a full year yet. Just within the year between, I think I started messing with it last year in March or April and kind of on and off. Going from there to December this past year, it grew a lot. Like I said, even the simple thing of like not having these plugins that are being developed to make it easier to see where you're at when you're developing in your widget tree, the changes in the JSON library, a lot less bugs, a lot less problems with building stuff out. I'd say it's pretty popular. As far as jobs though, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot out there yet, not enough demand, but it's something fun that I deal with on the side. You know, I've done a little bit of native Android development. I wouldn't say I'm an Android developer, but I definitely enjoyed dealing with the UI in Flutter way more than dealing with the XML and layouts in Android. It's not fun at all, at least for me. It's much easier for a web developer to come in and mess with the layouts in Flutter than it is to start dealing with XML and getting all that stuff correct. So, we have a project here at work, and I decided to take some of the designs that the designers were giving us, and I started building it out in Flutter, and I had almost up to parity within a day or so. Like the app, this is much earlier in the project, but I had the layout. There was no business logic behind the scenes, but I was just challenging myself to say, oh, let me see if I can build this layout in Flutter, and I was able to do it like in a day. Now that was only about 2 or 3 screens with, you know, multi-column, multi-rows, you know, but it was something that I hadn't messed with it in a while. I'm like, you know, I'll just challenge myself and see if I can build this out. And it was really easy. Now, it would have taken me forever to do it in Android because I never had the patience long enough to really comprehend the XML layout system in Android. But, yeah. So, you can, if you want to do Android development, you know, you can build it all in Flutter and not deal with Android and deploy it to the App Store and not have any issues. As you can see, that other website had plenty of them on there, plenty of apps in the Play Store just by itself. So I don't think it's going away anywhere time soon. It seems like Google's continuing to put more resources. They just announced with 1.2 that they're still putting more resources into the desktop embedding portion of it. So I tried getting it to work on my machine. I couldn't get the Flutter to render in the desktop itself. But at their kickoff, at their live event, they had what appeared to be a PowerPoint as they're demoing everything out for all the new features that's coming with Flutter 1.0 and all the partners that are kind of jumping on board with CI/CD pipelines, animation builders, stuff like that. That whole presentation was a Flutter app that was running on Mac OS. And they surprised the audience at the very end, like, guess what? This is not PowerPoint. This isn't Google Slides. This is a Flutter app. And it's running on Mac OS. Here it is. There you go. So it seems like they're pushing the desktop pretty hard. Like I said, I haven't heard much about the Hummingbird project yet in a while since they announced it. But, so, I mean, if you're an independent developer and you want to be like I just want to build apps and deploy them to the store, I think Flutter's really fast. And you can look it up. There's a lot of developer stories out there saying how fast they can get stuff up and running in Flutter versus having to, especially if you're doing multi-platform, but, you know.
All right, great.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thanks, I appreciate you guys coming out.
Station ends with like
The end. Guess I shouldn't put it up that way.
So yeah, if anybody is thought maybe they missed something or anything like that, we should have the video up on YouTube in a couple weeks. Thanks again, everybody, for coming out. We do have an open source project that we're working on. I sent out a message to everybody that came out tonight for an invite link to join our Slack channel. So we'll have like updates and resources and all that kind of thing on the Slack channel, so please join. I was going to talk a little bit about the open source project that we're doing, but nobody that has been working on it was able to make it tonight. But it's an open source tool for businesses or development teams to get together and kind of create like their own space for the company. Like, here's what my skills are and what I'm working on and that sort of thing. And Alex has been working on user stories for it, so we've got a Kanban board on GitHub, or ZenHub, GitHub and ZenHub. So we're still working out user stories. So if anybody's looking to contribute to open source, we've got that going. But yeah, feel free to eat some more pizza. We've still got a whole lot left. If anybody wants to give like a lightning talk or anything, I know that's all the rage. Feel free. Dwayne, you want to give a lightning talk for your own stream?
No, but you can check out otech.events for streaming different events and stuff.
Yes.
I just linked the URL to the slides in the Slack channel as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually this is the last app that I was trying to show. So, oh, am I recording myself? Probably should stop. Let me see.
Upper right to the circle with the square in the center.
Oh, yeah. Stop. Okay. So, yeah. You click the About, it knows what operating system you're on. Then dialog buttons look different. The switches look different.
That's what you want.
Yeah. So, it is possible, but it's, yeah.